Was It Heaven or Hell by Mark Twain. Continued. How can you make such an odious confession like that, and so indifferent a tone, when you know how we feel about all forms of... Hush! You are as ignorant as cats, both of you. You don't know what you're talking about. You are like the rest of the moral moles. You lie from morning till night, but because you don't do it with your mouths, but only with your lying eyes and your lying inflections, your deceptively misplaced emphasis, and your misleading gestures, you turn up your complacent noses in parade before God and the world as saintly and unsmirched truth speakers, in whose cold storage souls a lie would freeze to death if it goes there. Why will you humbug yourself with that foolish notion that no lie is a lie except a spoken one? What is the difference between lying with your eyes and lying with your mouth? There is none, and if you would reflect a moment, you would see that it is so. There isn't a human being that doesn't tell a gross of lies every day of his life. And you, why between you tell 30,000, and yet you flare up here in a lurid, hypocritical horror because I tell that child a benevolent and sinless lie to protect her from her imagination, which would get to work and warm up her blood to a fever in an hour, if I were disloyal enough to my duty to let it, which I should probably do, if I were interested in saving my soul by such disreputable means. Come, let us reason together, and let us examine details when you two were in the sick room raising that riot. What would you have done if you had known I was coming? Well, what? You would have slipped out and carried Helen with you, wouldn't you? The ladies were silent. What would be your object and intention? Well, what? To keep me from finding out your guilt? To beguile me to infer that Margaret's excitement proceeded from some cause not known to you? In a word, to tell me a lie, a silent lie? Moreover, a possibly harmful one? The twins colored, but did not speak. You not only tell myriads of silent lies, but you tell lies with your mouths, you two. That is not so. It is so, but only harmless ones. You never dream of uttering a harmful one. Do you know that that is a concession and a confession? How do you mean? It is an unconscious concession that harmless lies are not criminal. It is a confession that you constantly make that discrimination. For instance, you declined old Mrs. Foster's invitation last week to meet those odious Higbees at supper, in a polite note, in which you expressed regret and said you were very sorry you could not go. It was a lie. It was as unmitigated a lie as was ever uttered. Deny it, Hester. With another lie. Hester replied with a toss of her head, that will not do. Answer, was it a lie or wasn't it? The color stole into the cheeks of both women, and, with a struggle and an effort, they got out their confession. It was a lie. Good. The reform is beginning. There is hope for you yet. You will not tell a lie to save your dearest friend's soul, but you will spew out one without a scruple to save yourself. The discomfort of telling an unpleasant truth. He rose, Hester speaking for both said coldly, we have lied. We perceive it. It will occur no more. To lie is a sin. We shall never tell another one of any kind whatsoever, even lies of courtesy or benevolence, to save any one a pang or a sorrow decreed for him by God. Ah, how soon you will fail. In fact, you have fallen already. For what you have just uttered is a lie. Goodbye. Reform. One of you go to the sick room now. Now, we have chapter 4. 12 days later, mother and child were lingering in the grip of the hideous disease. Of hope for either there was little. The aged sisters looked white and worn, but they would not give up their posts. Their hearts were breaking, poor old things, but their grit was steadfast and indestructible. All the 12 days the mother had pined for the child, and the child for the mother, but both knew that the prayer of these longings could not be granted. When the mother was told on the first day that her disease was typhoid, she was frightened and asked if there was danger that Helen could have contracted it the day before, when she was in that sick chamber on that confession visit. Hester told her the doctor had pooh-poohed the idea. It troubled Hester to say it, although it was true, for she had not believed the doctor. When she saw the mother's joy in the news, the pain in her conscience lost something of its force, a result which made her ashamed of the constructive deception which she had practiced, although not ashamed enough to make her distinctly and definitely wish she had refrained from it. From that moment, the sick woman understood that her daughter must remain away, and she said that she would reconcile herself to the separation the best she could, for she would rather suffer death than to have her child's health imperiled. That afternoon Helen had taken to her bed, ill. She grew worse that night. In the morning her mother asked after her, "Is she well?" Hester turned cold. She opened her lips, but the words refused to come. The mother lay languidly looking, musing, waiting. Suddenly she turned white and gasped out, "Oh, my God, what is it? Is she sick?" Then the poor aunt's tortured heart rose in rebellion, and words came, "No, be comforted. She is well." The sick woman put all her happy heart in her gratitude. "Thank God for those dear words. Kiss him. How I worship you for saying them." Hester told this incident to Hannah, who received it with a rebuking look and said coldly, "Sister, it was a lie." Hester's lips trembled piteously. She choked down a sob and said, "Oh, Hannah, it was a sin, but I could not help it. I could not endure the fright and misery that were in her face." And one of the things that people mess up, they act like, "Oh, there's curse words." Not even if they're used literally, aka appropriately, will they be swear words. It's when you use non-literal mentions of going to the bathroom and sex and maybe even something like an animal that you can't eat, that you shouldn't be eating, like a pig or a dog or something. It becomes swearing. That's it, Oh, well, sexual things too. People mention sexual things but not mean them literally. No matter, it was a lie. God will hold you to account for it. "Oh, I know it. I know it," cried Hester, wringing her hands. "But even if it were now, I could not help it. I know I should do it again. Then take my place with Helen in the morning. I will make the report myself." Hester clung to her sister, begging and imploring. "Don't, Hannah. Oh, don't. You will kill her. I will at least speak the truth." In the morning she had a cruel report to bear to the mother, and she braced herself for the trial. When she returned from her mission, Hester was waiting, pale and trembling, in the hall. She whispered, "Oh, how did she take it, that poor, desolate mother?" Hannah's eyes were swimming in tears. She said, God forgive me. I told her the child was well." Hester gathered her to her heart with a grateful "God bless you, Hannah," and poured out her thankfulness in an inundation of worshiping praises. After that, the two knew the limit of their strength and accepted their fate. They surrendered humbly and abandoned themselves to the hard requirements of the situation. Daily they told the morning lie and confessed their sin in prayer, not asking forgiveness as not being worthy of it, but only wishing to make record that they had realized their wickedness and were not desiring to hide it or excuse it. Well, you can do both, right? Daily, as the fair young idol of the house sank lower and lower, the sorrowful old aunts painted their glowing bloom and her fresh young beauty to the wan mother, and winced under the stabs her ecstasies of joy and gratitude gave them. In the first days, while the child had strength to hold a pencil, she wrote fond little love notes to her mother, in which she concealed her illness, and these the mother read and reread through happy eyes, wet with thankful tears, and kissed them over and over again, and treasured them as precious things under her pillow. Then came the day when the strength was gone from the land, the mind wandered, and the tongue babbled pathetic incoherencies. This was a sore dilemma for the poor aunts. They were no love notes for the mother. They did not know what to do. Hester began a carefully studied and plausible explanation, but lost track of it, and grew confused and suspicion began to show in the mother's face. Then alarmed, Hester saw it, recognized the imminence of the danger, and descended to the emergency, pulling herself resolutely together and plucking victory from the open jaws of defeat. In a placid and convincing voice she said, "I thought it might distress you to know it, but Helen spent the night at the Slowens. There was a little party there, and although she did not want to go, and you so sick, we persuaded her. She being young and needing the innocent pastimes of youth, we believed that you would approve. But she will write the moment when she comes. How good you are, and how dear and thoughtful for us both." Well, maybe such things were innocent back then, but nowadays I don't. Thoughtful for us both. Approve. Why, I thank you with all my heart. My poor little exile. Tell her I want her to have every pleasure she can. I would not rob her of one. Only tell her to keep her health. That is all I ask. Don't let her that suffer. I could not bear it. How thankful I am that she escaped this infection, and what a narrow risk she ran. Aunt Hester, think of that lovely face, all dulled and burned with fever. I can't bear the thought of it. Keep her health, keep her bloom. I can see her now, the dainty creature with the big blue, earnest eyes, and sweet, oh, so sweet, gentle and winning. Is she as beautiful as ever, dear Aunt Hester? Oh, more beautiful and bright and charming than ever she was before, if such a thing can be. And Hester turned away and fumbled with the medicine bottles to hide her shame and grief. Chapter 5. After a little, both aunts were laboring upon a difficult and baffling work in Helen's chamber, patiently and earnestly, with their stiff old fingers. They were trying to forge the required note. They made failure after failure, but they improved little by little all the time. The pity of it all, the pathetic humor of it. There was none to see. They themselves were unconscious of it. Often their tears fell upon the notes and spoiled them. Sometimes a single misinformed word made a note risky, which could have ventured but for that. But at last Hannah produced one whose script was good enough imitation of Helen's to pass any but a suspicious eye, and bountifully enriched it with the petting phrases and loving nicknames that had been familiar on the child's lips from her nursery days. She carried it to the mother, who took it with avidity and kissed it and fondled it, reading its precious words over and over again, and dwelling with deep contentment upon its closing paragraph. Mousy, darling. Is it Mousy or Mousy? If I could only see you and kiss your eyes and feel your arms about me. I am so glad my practicing does not disturb you. Get well soon. Everybody is good to me. But I am so lonesome without you, dear Mama. The poor child. I know just how she feels. I cannot quite be happy without me. And I live in the light of her eyes. Tell her she must practice all she pleases. And Aunt Hannah, tell her I can't hear the piano this far, nor her dear voice when she sings. God knows I wish I could. No one knows how sweet that voice is to me, and to think, some day, it will be silent. What are you crying for? Only because it was just a memory. When I came away, she was singing Loch Lomond, the pathos of it. It always moves me so when she sings that. And me too, how heartbreakingly beautiful it is when some youthful sorrow is brooding in her breast, and she sings it for the mystic healing it brings. Aunt Hannah, dear Margaret, I'm very ill. Sometimes it comes over me that I shall never hear that dear voice again. Oh, don't, Margaret. I can't bear it. Margaret was moved and distressed, and said gently, There, let me put my arms around you. Don't cry. There, put your cheek to mine. Be comforted. I wish to live. I wish to live if I can. Ah, what could she do without me? Does she often speak of me? But I know she does. Oh, all the time. My sweet child. She wrote the note the moment she came home. Yes, for the first moment, we would not wait to take off her things. I knew it. It is her dear, impulsive affectionate way. I knew it without asking, but I wanted to hear you say it. The petted wife knows she is loved, but she makes her husband tell her so every day, just for the joy of hearing it. Well, it's good if they don't, if they let the husband go off script with the words that he says, of course. She used the pen this time. That is better. The pencil marks could rub it out. And I should grieve you for that. Did you suggest that she use the pen? Yet no, it was her own idea. The mother looked her pleasure and said, I was hoping you would say that. There was never such a dear and thoughtful child, Aunt Hannah. Dear Margaret, go and tell her I think of her all the time and worship her. By worship, they mean respect, of course, not the same thing that we almost always mean when we say that word. Why, you are crying again. Don't be so worried about me, dear. I think there is nothing to fear yet. The grieving messenger carried her message and piously delivered it to the unheeding ears. The girl babbled on, unaware, looking up at her with wondering and startling eyes, flaming with fever, eyes in which was no light of recognition. Are you? No. You are not my mother. I want her. Oh, I want her. She was here a minute ago. I did not see her go. Will she come? Will she come quickly? Will she come now? There are so many houses, and they press me so. And everything whirls and turns and whirls. Oh, my head, my head. And so she wandered on in her pain, flitting from one torturing fancy to another, and tossing her arms about in a weary and ceaseless persecution of unrest. Poor old Hannah wetted the parched lips and softly stroked the hot brow, murmuring endearing and pitying words, and thanking the Father of all that the mother was happy and did not know. Of course, the family language in reference to God is, metaphorical. It's not literal in any case. Chapter 6. Daily the child sank lower and steadily lower towards the grave, and daily the sorrowing old watchers carried gilded tidings of her radiant health and loveliness to the happy mother, whose pilgrimage was also now nearing its end, and daily they forged loving and cheering notes in the child's hand, and stood by with remorseful consciences and bleeding hearts, and wept to see the grateful mother devour them and adore them and treasure them away as things beyond price, because of their sweet source, and sacred because her child's hand had touched them. At last came that kindly friend who brings healing and peace to all. The lights were burning low in the solemn hush which precedes the dawn. Vague figures flitted, soundless, along the dim hall, and gathered silent and awed in Helen's chamber, and grouped themselves about her bed, for a warning had gone forth, and they knew the dying girl lay with closed lids and unconscious, the drapery upon her breast, faintly rising and falling, as her wasting life ebbed away. At intervals a sigh or a muffled sob broke out the stillness. The same haunting thought was in all minds there, the pitying of this death, the going out into the great darkness, and the mother not here to help and hearten and bless. Helen stirred. Her hands began to grope wistfully about, as if they sought something. She had been blind some hours. The end was come. All knew it. With a great sob, Hester gathered her to her breast, saying, "Oh, my child, my darling!" A rapturous light broke in the dying girl's face, for it was mercifully vouchsafed her to mistake those sheltering arms for another's, and she went to her rest, murmuring, "Oh, Mama, I am so happy. I so longed for you. Now I can die." 2 hours later, Hester made her report. The mother asks, "How is it with the child?" "She is well." Chapter 7. A sheaf of white crepe and black was hung upon the door of the house, and there it swayed and rustled in the wind, and it whispered its tidings. At noon the preparation of the dead was finished, and in the coffin lay the fair young form, beautiful, and in the sweet face a great peace. Two mourners sat by it, grieving and worshipping, Hannah and the black woman, Tilly. Hester came, and she was trembling, for a great trouble was upon her spirit. She said, she asks for a note. It's best that the soonest that a person can be buried by day, after holding a funeral service connected with early afternoon or late afternoon prayer, or I guess even dawn prayer, is when you should bury. You shouldn't wait days and all that stuff. But anyway, she asked for a note. And this is what they're doing there. It's only nowadays we've joined in that silliness. Hannah's face blanched. She had not thought of this. It had seemed that pathetic service was ended, but she realized now that she could not be. For a little while, the two women stood looking into each other's face with vacant eyes. Then Hannah said, "There's no way out of it. She must have it. She will suspect else. And she would find out. Yes, it would break her heart." She looked at the dead face, and her eyes filled. "I will write it," she said. Hester carried it. The closing line said, "Darling Mousy," or Mousy? I think it's Mousy. "Dear sweet mother, we shall soon be together again. Is not that good news? And it is true. They all say it is true." The mother mourned, saying, "Poor child, how will she bear it when she knows? I shall never see her again in life. It is hard, so hard, she does not suspect. You guard her from that. She thinks you will soon be well. How good you are and careful, dear Aunt Hester. None goes near her who could carry the infection. It would be a crime. But you see her, with a distance between, yes. That is so good. Others one could not trust. But you two guardian angels, steel is not so true as you. Others would be unfaithful, and many would deceive and lie." Hester's eyes fell, and her poor old lips trembled. "Let me kiss you for her, Aunt Hester, and when I am gone, and the danger's past, pass the kiss upon her dear lips some day, and say her mother sent it, and all her mother's broken heart is in it." Within the hour, Hester, raining tears upon the dead face, performed her pathetic mission. Is that last rites? Chapter 8. Another day dawned and grew, and spread its sunshine in the earth. Aunt Hannah brought comforting news to the failing mother, and a happy note which said again, "We have but a little time to wait, darling mother. Then we shall be together." The deep note of a bell came moaning down the wind. "Aunt Hannah, it is tolling. Some poor soul is at rest. As I shall be soon, you will not let her forget me." "Oh, God knows, she never will." "Do you not hear strange noises, Aunt Hannah? It sounds like the shuffling of many feet." "We hoped you would not hear it, dear. It is a little company gathering for Helen's sake. Poor little prisoner. There will be music, and she loves it so. We thought you would not mind." "Mind? Oh, no, no, oh. Give her everything her dear heart can desire. How good you two are to her, and how good to me. God bless you both, always." After a listening pause, "How lovely. It is her organ. Is she playing it herself, do you think? Faint and rich and inspiring. The chords floated to her ears on the still air. Yes, it is her touch, dear heart, I recognize it. They are singing. Why? It is a hymn, and the sacredness of all, the most touching, the most consoling. It seems to open the gates of paradise to me. If I could die now." Faint and far the words rose out of the stillness. "Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee, e'en though it be a cross that raiseth me." Well, remember that stuff about take your cross and follow him. Do your own hero deeds, basically. Don't rely on his. With the closing of the hymn, another soul passed to its rest, and they that had been one in life were not sundered in death. The sisters mourning and rejoicing said, how blessed it was that she never knew. Chapter 9. At midnight they sat together, grieving, and the angel of the Lord appeared in the midst, transfigured with a radiance not of earth, and speaking said, for liars a place is appointed. There they burn in the fires of hell, from everlasting unto everlasting. Repent. The bereaved fell upon their knees before him, and clasped their hands, and bowed their grey heads adoring. But their tongues clove to the roof of their mouths, and they were dumb. Speak, that I may bear the message to the chancery of heaven, and bring again the decree from which there is no appeal. Then they bowed their heads yet lower, and one said, our sin is great, and we suffer shame, but only perfect and final repentance can make us whole. And we are poor creatures who have learned our human weakness, and we know that if we were in those hard straits again, our hearts would fail again, and we should sin as before. The strong could prevail and so be saved, but we are lost. They lifted their heads in supplication, the angel was gone. While they marveled and wept, he came again, and bending low, he whispered the decree. Now, that's one problem with the idea of reincarnation, is that really, you're not going to do it again, especially if you're made to forget, because you're not going to have this body with its memories to pass it on. But chapter 10, was it heaven or hell? And this downed mushroom here, thought to include that one in the scene.